They posted the group photo on Facebook. There was my son, my daughter, my grandkids, even my ex-husband's second wife. But not me. They hadn't forgotten to invite me. They'd chosen not to. I'm Linda Cartwright, 67 years old, retired after 42 years in the school system. I was the one who always organized everything: birthdays, holidays, get-togethers. My house was the heartbeat of the family, until I wasn't needed anymore. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when my neighbor Sandy knocked with her tablet, giggling about my big ol' reunion. I smiled politely, confused. Then she flipped the screen toward me. There it was, a family reunion picnic at Liberty Park in Cincinnati. Tables decked out in red, white, and blue, kids running in sprinklers, folding chairs full of my blood. I stared. My son Jason, arm around his wife. My daughter, Emily, holding a drink and laughing beside her cousins. Even my 3 grandkids. No one had told me. Not a text, not a call, nothing. And the worst part? They used my money to fund it. I'm not rich, but I've always been generous. Years ago, I opened a shared family account to help with emergencies and events. I was the sole primary on the account, but everyone had access. I never imagined they'd use it to exclude me. For years, I gave without keeping score. I paid for college textbooks, sent grocery money during hard times, covered the down payment on Jason's first home. Emily needed dental surgery, I paid. Because that's what moms do, right? That night, I sat at the kitchen table, holding my ceramic mug with trembling fingers. Cold tea. I felt humiliated, not because they had fun, because they'd done it without me and with my money. I called Jason. No answer. Emily texted back saying, "It wasn't a big deal, just something thrown together last minute." Except the decorations, food truck, and matching shirts told a different story. They'd lied. And then gaslit me for feeling hurt. That's when something inside me shifted. I'd spent my life sacrificing, putting everyone else first. And this was how they repaid me? I wasn't going to scream or beg or cry. No, I was going to remind them who built the table they were now feasting at. And it all began with one click. I didn't do anything rash, not at first. I closed the account with calm fingers, confirming each step like I was paying bills. No drama, no warnings, just silence. Then I got up, watered my plants, and made a sandwich. That's the thing about being ignored for long enough. Eventually, the peace becomes your weapon. The next day, my phone rang 5 times before noon. Jason, Emily, my niece Kelsey, all just checking in. But I knew. They'd noticed. Jason was the first to crack. "Mom, hey, weird thing. The family card got declined when I tried to pay for Leo's camp deposit. Do you know what's going on?" I paused. "Oh?" "I thought it wasn't a big deal," I said, repeating his sister's words back to him. "Just something thrown together last minute." There was silence, then stammering. "It's not about the reunion, but it is, Jason." I kept my voice even. "It's about respect." Later that evening, I sat on the porch, watching the sky melt into orange. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear. This wasn't about a picnic. This was about how I had become useful, not loved. They thought I was just the woman behind the checks, the fixer, the giver. And once they didn't need fixing, they erased me. It hurt more than I'll ever let them know. But I'd been through worse. I'd raised 2 kids while working full-time and taking night classes. I survived my husband's affair and his smug second wife, walking into my grandchildren's lives like I was the nanny. I'd swallowed a lot in my life. Now, I was full. They called again. Emily's voice was colder this time. "Are you seriously punishing us by closing the account?" she snapped. "That's not fair to everyone else." I nearly laughed. "Funny," I replied. "I wasn't invited. So why would everyone else matter more than the one who made sure those bills were paid?" She hung up. Not a sorry, not a hint of remorse. And then the real unraveling began. I started getting little messages from family members I hadn't heard from in ages. "Hey, Aunt Linda, just wondering if you're still helping with gas cards this summer? Hi, Mom said you might chip in for the Airbnb at Lake George? Each time I replied with the same message. I'm no longer managing family support funds. Please speak to Jason or Emily. Let them carry the weight they once begged me to hold. Let them answer the questions. Let them be the center. If they wanted me invisible, I would grant their wish. Still, I wasn't done. The account had been the backbone of family logistics, phone plans, grocery subscriptions, even the Hulu account, all tied to it. One by one, I started removing my name, canceling payments. Jason's phone plan stopped working on the day of his big Zoom pitch. Emily texted in all caps, "Netflix isn't working. Did you do something?" No, sweetheart, you did something. I wasn't out for revenge. I just wanted them to see me, not as a bank, not as a background figure, as their mother, as their family. But the truth was, if you erase someone long enough, you might not recognize them when they return. I'd always been the soft place they landed. Now, I was the mirror. It's funny, the things you think about when your world shrinks. I used to schedule everything around my family, bake cookies for school fundraisers, send birthday cards with crisp $20 bills, host Thanksgiving dinners that left me with sore feet but a full heart. Now, my days were silent, so I filled them with something new. I remembered how it felt when I saw that photo online. The red checkered tablecloths, the grandkids laughing, the matching shirts, a family pretending the woman who held it all together didn't exist. They thought I'd fade. They thought I'd sit home with my regrets and reruns. But instead, I pulled out my spiral notebook and started writing names. Not theirs, mine. I decided to host a small gathering, a reunion of my kind. Not just blood, but heart. Old colleagues, neighbors who brought me soup when I was sick, friends I met in widow support group, even a former student who once said, "You changed my life." These were people who remembered me, not for what I gave, but for who I was. I booked the community center downtown, the same one Jason's wife once called too run down for our taste. I loved its old brick walls and wooden beams. I arranged catering, real Southern comfort food, fried chicken, collard greens, biscuits. I paid for it myself, from my private account, the one they never knew about. Then I printed invitations, simple gold-lettered cards that said, "You are invited to a gathering of gratitude and grace, hosted by Linda Cartwright. No RSVP required, no matching shirts, no fake smiles." I spent days assembling gift bags, each one with a handwritten note, a photo memory if I had one, and a little jar of homemade jam. I didn't post anything about it online. I didn't tell Jason or Emily. They weren't invited. The day came, and it was perfect. Warm breeze, golden sunlight pouring through the high windows. My guests arrived one by one, bearing flowers, hugs, stories. It wasn't loud, it wasn't grand, but it was real. At one point, Mrs. Hill, my old neighbor from when we lived on East Elwood, hugged me and said, "Linda, you still have so much love around you. Don't ever let your children convince you otherwise." That moment nearly undid me, but I smiled and squeezed her hand, because she was right. I didn't need to beg for a seat at someone else's table. I'd built my own. And yet, that night, I sat in bed scrolling through social media. Nothing from Jason, nothing from Emily. But then I saw it, a post from my granddaughter, Megan. "Wish Grandma had been at the reunion. It felt weird without her." Tears filled my eyes, not because of regret, but because of hope. Maybe she hadn't forgotten. Maybe, just maybe, she was starting to notice the cracks too. Then came the twist I hadn't expected. A knock at the door the following afternoon. Jason, holding a grocery bag and looking more tired than I'd ever seen him. "Mom, we need to talk." Jason sat across from me, hands clenched, staring down into the steam of the coffee I'd just placed in front of him. My son, my firstborn. The same boy who once cried in my lap after scraping his knee. Now a man in his 40s, looking like he'd run out of words. Good. It was time I used mine. "I know you're upset," he started, cautiously. "We just thought, with your back problems, you wouldn't want to travel." I tilted my head, my eyes narrowing. Jason. The reunion was 20 minutes from my house. He flushed. Emily said maybe it'd be too much for you, and I don't know, everyone sort of assumed. No, I said, my voice steady but sharp. You didn't assume. You decided. He blinked. I leaned forward. You all decided I wasn't needed. You used my money. You made memories. And then you posted about it like I was already dead. Jason opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. Do you have any idea how that felt? He looked down. I'm sorry, Mom. It wasn't supposed to be personal. I felt something in me snap, not in rage, but in sorrow. Jason, when did I stop being personal to you? I stood up, walked over to the bookshelf, and pulled out an old photo album. I flipped through pages of pool parties, holiday dinners, school projects, me holding babies, me baking cakes, me showing up. I said it in front of him. I have spent decades being the one who showed up. Even when your father left, even when I had nothing, I made sure you and your sister never felt it. And now, you exclude me from the very thing I lived my whole life for. Family. He sighed, rubbing his temples. I didn't think it would matter this much. I nodded slowly. Of course not, because I've never let it show when it mattered to me. I just kept giving, paying, solving. He looked at me, his expression beginning to crumble. I didn't mean to hurt you, Mom. I nodded again. But you did. We sat in silence for a long time. Then he asked, Is this about the money? I laughed, soft, bitter. It's never been about the money, Jason. That was just the tool you used to forget me. I paused. But now that you ask, yes, you don't get to use what I built to shut me out. He swallowed hard, and I could see the guilt washing over him. But guilt wasn't what I wanted anymore. I didn't need him to be sorry. I needed him to remember who stayed, who sacrificed, who mattered, even when it was inconvenient. He finally asked, What do you want from me, Mom? I looked at him, really looked. This man I had raised, this man I didn't recognize anymore. I want the truth. I want to know when I became too much trouble, too embarrassing, too old for the pictures. He didn't answer, which frankly said enough. He stood, and before walking out, he muttered, I'll talk to Emily. Maybe we can fix this. I shook my head slowly. No, Jason, I'm fixing it. You'll just have to learn to live with the cracks. A few days passed in silence. No calls, no texts, no apology. But then, on a quiet Thursday afternoon, my doorbell rang. And this time, it wasn't Jason. It was Megan, my oldest granddaughter, 14 years old, all awkward limbs and anxious eyes, holding a small paper bag. Hi, Grandma, she said softly. Mom doesn't know I'm here. I blinked, heart catching in my throat. She stepped in before I could speak and looked around the living room like it was sacred ground. I brought you snickerdoodles, she mumbled, handing over the bag. I baked them, from your old recipe. I smiled as I opened the bag. They were a little overbaked, but the gesture warmed me deeper than anything had in weeks. Thank you, sweetheart, I said, gesturing for her to sit. We sat across from each other, the silence thick but soft. Finally, she looked up and asked the question I knew had been waiting on her tongue. Why weren't you at the reunion? I closed my eyes for a second, steadying myself, not to protect me, but to speak in a way that didn't damage her. I wasn't invited, Megan. Her eyes widened. What? But why? I gave a small, sad smile. That's something you'll have to ask your parents. But the truth is, sometimes, grown-ups forget who's always been in the background, until the background gets quiet. She stared at me for a long time. Then she whispered, It didn't feel right without you? Mom said you were busy, but I knew that didn't sound like you. My heart cracked open. You noticed that? She nodded, biting her lip. You're always there, for birthdays, for school plays. You always remember what I like, even when I forget. I reached out and took her hand. That small hand that used to fit in mine so easily. "Thank you for coming, Megan. I want you to always remember something, okay?" She nodded. "You don't have to pick sides. You don't have to understand everything right now. Just promise me you'll always pay attention to how people make you feel and how they treat others who love them." She leaned in and hugged me tightly. That teenager who was too cool to even wave goodbye at drop-off just a year ago, now holding on to me like she was 5 again. "I love you, Grandma," she whispered. "Even if they act dumb sometimes, I don't forget." Tears filled my eyes. "I love you too, sweetheart. Always." Before she left, she asked if we could make jam together again sometime. "Not for anyone else," she said. "Just for us." I laughed. "It's a date." After she left, I sat on the porch with a warm cookie and a cold tea. My phone buzzed. A message from Emily. "Did Megan stop by?" I didn't reply. Not because I was cruel, because sometimes silence speaks louder than any confrontation. They wanted me silent for the reunion. Now they'd learn what silence felt like. But in the quiet, I realized something important. I hadn't lost everything. I hadn't lost everyone. I still had a legacy, a thread, a spark, and that was enough to keep my fire going. The morning after Megan's visit, I woke up lighter. Not happy, not healed, but clear. For the first time in a long while, I felt power humming through my bones, not the kind that shouts, but the kind that doesn't need to ask twice. I pulled out a manila folder from my file cabinet. Inside, account numbers, documents, legal letters. Years of quietly managing things no one else cared about. I'd set up the family mobile plan, the car insurance bundle, even Jason and Emily's shared roadside assistance account, years ago when they were both too broke or too distracted to manage it themselves. They treated me like a retired woman with nothing better to do, but they forgot. I wasn't just a mother. I had been the architect of their comfort. It was time to dismantle it, brick by brick. I started by transferring everything that still had my name off. I canceled the bundled phone plan. Their numbers went dark within 24 hours. I suspended the insurance policy I'd paid into, the automatic payments for their streaming, grocery apps, kids' tutors, all gone. Then I made one final call to my attorney. He had drafted my will 10 years ago, back when I still thought the biggest tragedy would be dying before seeing my grandkids graduate. Now I had a new request. I updated the beneficiaries, removed Jason and Emily from every asset they assumed would fall in their laps. Instead, I redirected everything, my home, my pension account, even my life insurance policy, to a trust for Megan. Accessible only when she turns 25, and only if she remains in good standing. By my definition, not her parents, I added a note, to the one who showed up. That weekend, I invited a few close friends to a quiet garden brunch at the Botanical Center. I made sure to dress elegantly. I knew Emily's friend Caroline would be there. She always was when something was worth gossiping about. I welcomed her with a warm smile and said, loud enough for others to hear, "Isn't it peaceful not worrying about hosting the family anymore?" She blinked, confused. "Oh, so you're really stepping back?" I smiled and sipped my tea. I'm exactly where they asked me to be. Out of their way. Word travels fast in small towns. By Monday morning, Emily's cryptic Facebook status read, "Be careful who you push away. Not everyone comes back." Jason emailed me. Not called, emailed. "Mom, we really need to talk. The insurance lapsed. I got a fine. Megan mentioned something about a trust. What's going on?" I didn't reply. Because when someone makes you a stranger, you don't owe them explanations. Instead, I printed out one final letter and mailed it to both their homes. "Dear Jason and Emily, you taught me something I never expected to learn this late in life. That love without respect is just quiet cruelty. You chose to move forward without me. So now I'm doing the same. Please do not contact me unless it's for something truly urgent. I am fine. I am free. And I am finished pretending. With grace, Mom. It wasn't revenge. It was recognition of who they really were and who I had always been until I stopped being convenient. It was a rainy Monday when it arrived. An envelope hand-addressed in neat blue ink. Not a bill, not a flyer, no return address. I opened it slowly, sitting at the same kitchen table where I used to pack school lunches and sign permission slips. Inside was a folded piece of paper. One line across the top, written in that uneven half-cursive script only one person in the world still used. "Grandma, can I still come over?" Megan. My hands trembled. It was simple, innocent. But it hit like a thunderclap. It wasn't a text. It wasn't some social media post designed for sympathy clicks. It was a letter, a real one, thought out, sent with purpose. She had written it, licked the envelope, mailed it, because she wanted to make sure I knew she still saw me. That night, I sat by the window as rain danced against the glass, thinking about the decades I'd spent bending myself into a version of mother and grandmother that made everyone else comfortable, always available, always saying yes, always smiling through the slights. But now, I wasn't bitter. I was awake. And that one sentence from Megan, it reminded me of the version of family I still believed in. The next Saturday, I picked her up from school in my old Ford. She ran across the parking lot with the kind of joy that can't be faked. We went to the farmer's market, bought peaches and honey, picked out a jar of her favorite pickles. We sat on a bench under a tree, and she told me about her classes, her friends, the boys she maybe liked, but don't tell Mom. I promised. Later, back at my house, I handed her a little box. Inside was a key. To my home, to my heart, to everything they tried to take from me, but couldn't. "This is yours," I told her. "You don't need to knock anymore." She looked up, eyes full. "I'll never forget you, Grandma." I smiled, holding her hand. "I know, sweetheart, and that's why you never need to earn your place here. You already have it." The final piece fell into place that evening. I got a call from an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. "Hello?" A soft voice. "Linda?" I froze. It was him, my ex-husband, Frank. We hadn't spoken in years. "I heard what happened," he said, "about the reunion, about the kids. I'm sorry, I didn't know they'd treat you that way." Silence stretched between us like a taut thread. Then he said, "You didn't deserve that. Not after everything you did for this family." It was strange, hearing him say those words after all these years. He hadn't defended me at the reunion. He hadn't even noticed my absence. But now, hearing my name in his voice, tinged with regret, felt like closing a book I'd kept open too long. "Thank you," I said, "but I'm okay now." "I'd like to make things right," he said. I smiled politely. "Some doors don't open again, Frank. But I wish you peace." And then I hung up. I'd given so many people chances to rewrite the story. Now I was writing my own ending, one built on respect, on honesty, on knowing your worth, even when the people closest to you forget it. A few months later, I hosted a dinner in my backyard. Friends, neighbors, Megan by my side, laughter under string lights, music playing softly from an old speaker. Not a single person asked where my children were, and for once I didn't feel like something was missing. I felt full. I felt seen. I felt home.